Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Carolina Rendeiro, the Honorary Consul of Portugal here in Miami, as well as the CEO of Connect to Global. And today we're going to be talking about the tech boom here in Miami. Unfortunately, we've had two people that had to bail out just recently due to emergencies. But you are left with two great people, okay? Leanne Buchanan and Pamela Fuertes, and I will introduce them. My background, if you can see it, let me go this way. That's where we're supposed to be today. However, due to COVID, we are here virtually, but I thought I'd kind of give you all the sense of what you're missing in Miami, and our weather's still good here as well. So I'm going to introduce our two panelists right now. And then we'll go into more of just a conversation. It's not going to be like drilling down questions or anything. It's actually just sharing what we have here in Miami and how we can work across borders. So Leanne Buchanan is the founding executive director of Venture Café Miami. And in this role, she works to facilitate sustainable growth, increase diversity and inclusion, and greater connectivity within Miami's innovation and startup community. Venture Café Miami helps innovators by enhancing and accelerating the growth of innovation in Miami through high-pack programming and events, and by creating intentional spaces for entrepreneurial individuals and organizations to gather, connect, and build relationships. Venture Café Miami is a member of a global network with partner organizations in Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts, St. Louis, Missouri, and Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Now, our next speaker and panelist is Pamela Fuertes, and Goldman Sachs. Pamela is the executive director of Goldman Sachs' 10,000 Small Businesses, an international economic development initiative designed to help entrepreneurs create jobs and economic opportunity by providing access to education, capital, and business support services. Powered by the Goldman Sachs Foundation, the 10,000 Small Businesses program helps small business leaders discover how to grow their businesses. So that is just a very short synopsis of two powerful women in Miami in this scene. And I'm going to just start it off with our new normal, guys. What is the new normal at Goldman Sachs?
Well, first of all, Carolina, thank you so much for the invitation to join you. And thank you for the opportunity to address everyone virtually. Leanne, it's a pleasure to join you on this panel. I know that it'll be a wonderful conversation. I think that for us, I think the key word is virtual, but I think that we're finding ways to keep the connection going. From our part, with respect to our program, we've completely pivoted to all things virtual. So we are conducting our program. Our program is being delivered. Our entrepreneurship program is being delivered online, virtually. The team has embraced all things virtual and technology-wise, and it's been a really great exercise to go through, because I think we've learned how to leverage technology, and I think we've all grown as well in embracing this. So I think we're very excited about seeing where this is going. When we first shifted to all virtual, there were two things. One was, in the short term, how are we going to satisfy the needs of the small business entrepreneurs that were participating in our program? And so we adjusted the timeline a little bit. We actually gave ourselves a little bit more time in order to condense as much information as possible and break it out into smaller timeframes. Number two, in the medium term, we said, okay, this is here to stay. It's going to be more than a month or a 3-month, experience. So what can we do to sort of leverage and keep the continuity and keep the authenticity of what our program is all about, which is really about connecting and really about helping small business owners discover how they can grow their business. And so we made some small modifications to the curriculum and to our overall outreach, and that has been, very successful. And then in the long term, we're looking at what key takeaways, what have we learned that should stay once we're all, more comfortable, or the circumstances, I should say, permit for us to meet in person. So we're looking forward to it, and we're very excited about where we are.
Awesome. Leanne?
I mean, normal is relative, and that's kind of the theme for us of 2020. For those that don't know, Venture Café is part of a global network, and we focus on ecosystem building. And what our strategy in Miami has been for the last 4 years was really thinking about convening and connecting to solve the silos and fragmentation that we saw in the ecosystem. And so we would typically host about 300 plus people. Carolina, I know you've been there. Pamela, I know you've been to our weekly programming in person every Thursday. And so we had to similarly make a very quick pivot. March 5th, we were in person in partnership with the Florida Israeli Business Accelerator and hosting Israeli startups. And then March 12th, we were completely online for VCM Virtual. And it's been really interesting because in the last about 4.5 years, we've seen over 50,000 innovators engage with Venture Café's programming relative to building the entrepreneurship ecosystem to make it more diverse, accessible, and inclusive. We partner with about 1,000 organizations. And so our biggest concern was, how do we keep that center of gravity around access to resources, around community, around connection, still vibrant and accessible to people in this really strange and uncertain time? And so happy to say in the past couple months, we're still averaging about 200 people per week in a virtual platform. We're still partnering with organizations, shifting the way we're partnering to make it more collaborative. So not just one organization hosting sessions, but multiple organizations hosting sessions. And we've seen about 6,000 people still an aggregate come through the online programming on a weekly basis, in aggregate overall during this period. And so for us, we're really thinking about two questions. One, timing of returning to being back in person and what that looks like. And to be honest, despite what some of the authorities say, I think there's multiple considerations. Will people feel comfortable? Will the laws allow it? And should we do it as an organization? But secondly, to the point of this conversation, we've had a really special moment to not be as busy as we were, so not really operating at breakneck speed, to zoom out and look at our ecosystem. And I hope we get a chance to talk about this in more detail today, but to really look at what is next for the work that we're thinking about doing. Where are there large ecosystem systemic gaps that we can begin to solve? Because we think we've done a lot in terms of catalyzing programming, convening, and connections over the last 4 years, but we know that the work doesn't stop at programming. So beginning to think about where we can be support mechanisms for other groups that are now really focused on programming, how we can help folks think really differently about inclusion and ecosystem solutions. So it's not just that you create a program and think that it's going to solve the talent gap, or that you create a program and think that it's going to solve the racial equity gap. So that's kind of what we've been up to, and that's our new normal for now.
Wow, that was a mouthful, okay? But I expected that from you, Leanne. But you went right into where I want to go. It's really, there's a couple of things. I think I for one, totally enjoy being on Zoom because I get a lot more done, especially in Miami. We're not sitting in traffic. We're not, that to me is the worst. But then a lot of the meetings are moving with more attendance too. And so there's more sharing in the networking capacity of it. And I think we're all benefiting from that at some level. All right. So that's one of the things that I really find in it. I want to go back to what you said about inclusion and diversity. That is the main topic in all kinds of, in the chambers of commerce right now, in economic development and universities and schools. That starts at an early age in order for it to really take hold, right? So we've had this opportunity these 8 months, which I feel have been advantageous on one end. We've had disadvantages on another. People are getting cabin fever. But I really do feel that even with parents doing schooling at home and everything, it's turned it to a different level, because I think our kids are also starting to see what you're seeing on a global basis. We're all in this together, as we all say now, right? We're all in this together. So we all have an opportunity to really kind of push some stuff forward that, and other times we'd never be able to do. On a previous panel we had this morning, they said that we had to fast forward e-commerce, right? 6 years ahead in 8 months. And that's so true. So, and going to that, we need to fast forward now where you two are. And so I'm going to go back to you, Leanne, as how are we fast forwarding? I believe we have a lot to do in our ecosystem yet in Miami. There's a lot to do. There's still some gaps, but there's tremendous opportunities if we can get everybody in the same sandbox playing together. So I'll let you take it from there, and Pam, you join in whenever, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, which is like, what's next? What opportunities exist, particularly as it relates to this framework of I like to say access, inclusion, and racial equity, and I don't think those equal the same thing. I rarely say diversity because I think if you focus on those three, diversity is like the output, right? And so from our standpoint, we've been thinking a lot about the difference between top-down institutional strategies of cultivating a more inclusive ecosystem versus bottom-up experiential strategies, right? And if you think about it, oftentimes, and I was just reading, in prep for this conversation, Startup Genome's report, Endeavor put out a report, Knight puts out these reports, everybody has a report. But then I think the challenge for me is, where is the disconnect between kind of these institutional level assessments and people's experiences? And if you ask people on the ground, I'm sure Pamela, with the folks in 10,000 small businesses, many of whom were regulars at the gathering, the Venture Cafe gathering, they're saying, that is my experience, my lived experience is really expertise that we should be elevating versus wholly kind of quantitative assessments of our ecosystem. So I think with that foundation, what we've been looking at very keenly is, how do we create space to listen? This is a unique moment. We've got some shifts in the political leadership happening. It's just the right time to really take a step back and begin to listen very closely for the folks that are often the unusual suspects, that are not the ones that you're calling up to say, how has your experience been in accessing capital? How has your experience been in navigating resources? Are they talking to each other, or do you find that you're repeating the same services and never able to get to the next stage of business support? As we think about that pipeline, to your point, Carolina, how well connected is the talent pipeline from academic institutions through to the workforce? I know Miami-Dade College does a really, really, really good job of integrating industry into the program. So there's almost seamless opportunities, but are all institutions like that? That's the real questions I think we need to begin to ask. And then I think the other piece that's really important for an ecosystem like Miami is it's nuanced, right? The issue of racial equity is nuanced. The Miami Herald recently came out with a series around, the fact that Miami's one of the most segregated cities in America for Black folks. And that was kind of shocking to some, not so shocking to others, but it really broke down some of the statistics regarding the racial disparities. And so when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, it makes sense to focus in on what that means for our local market. For Miami, we're a majority minority city. So inclusion looks different in Miami than it might look across the country or in other countries. You really need to look at the demographic populations and then understand where you can find real opportunities for bridging those gaps in equity. So on our standpoint, we've been listening, thinking really closely about opportunities to elevate groups that have been overlooked and underestimated, and then being very careful to understand the nuances around experiences to achieve a more inclusive ecosystem strategy.
Great. Pamela?
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you. Those are very empowering thoughts, Leanne, and I appreciate your mention of Miami-Dade College, because I think that, it is a good example of sort of like what's at the core of our academic institution. I think that where the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program and Miami-Dade College sort of meet at their point of intersection is on two things. Number one is their commitment to access, and you talked about that, which I think is key. For us, what's at the very center of whether it's an academic program or whether it's a special, some of the special announcements that we've made recently, like the collaborations with other academic institutions and private sector partners in our community. For Miami-Dade College, that's for sure access. And then for the 10,000 Small Business, that's what this program is really all about facilitating access to small business entrepreneurs so that they can grow their business. And within that, I think that given where we are right now, I think these past couple of months have been very helpful for us to sort of take a big picture pause and really understand where are the opportunities for us to leverage this access. And one of the things that we've done, and we just recently announced, is that we have now updated our program requirements. Our program requirements have now been amplified a little bit more to target and invite small businesses in our community to participate in our program, because we know that we believe in the power of small businesses, and we know that small businesses need support. So that's one thing we've done. Number two, we have made a commitment to raise the visibility of our program and to really, go out and meet with the different partners. We have a number of organizations that we're members of already, but really looking at impactful partnerships that can help drive transformative change, because we think that this is really what the future needs and what our community needs right now. And then, we're really committed now to localizing our efforts. The 10,000 Small Business Program, as Carolina mentioned, is an international initiative with a base in the UK, but with headquarters in New York. We are one of 17 centers in the United States, and every market is very different. But what we know about our market is that we have one of the largest concentrations of small businesses in the United States. We know that there are a large majority of those small businesses are minority-owned small businesses. We know that as a backdrop, our community is a global community, and we've all, talked about the different opportunities. But here we can meet with an Israeli company in the morning, with, in the afternoon with a company from Portugal, a company from France, a company from Jamaica, and this is the beauty of our community. And we really believe that what makes our investment in our program and our outreach so impactful and important is the fact that we are so diverse. But we know that we need to dig in a little deeper, and we know that there are so many more opportunities about how we can leverage everyone in the community, especially in the world of small business entrepreneurship.
Thank you. Ladies, we have a question, and it's coming directly from our ambassador in Washington, D.C., who is asking the question, what's in the tech ecosystem in Miami? How is it different? In what sense is it different from that, for example, in California or Massachusetts? Leanne, you can tackle this one down. Go for it. And I know what you're going to say, so let's go.
So it's interesting. When I think about the tech ecosystem, there's so many parameters. So, thinking through a couple lenses. From a funding standpoint, when you compare the amount of available capital, while it doesn't always distribute equally along that venture cycle, but when you think about equity-based capital and early stage capital, we actually exceed the global average. I think we're about 519 million total in early stage funding last year versus the global average is about 431 million. When you think about the total ecosystem value, that's early stage capital, total amount of businesses, and a variety of other factors, I think our ecosystem value is around 18 billion, thinking about that Startup Genome Global Ecosystem report, whereas the average is about 10.5 billion. So there's a lot of opportunities. It's said that in Miami or South Florida, I like to say Miami, but Miami MSA, so Miami kind of metro area, including up to the South Palm Beach County area, Miami MSA has it used to be about 3-to-1 ratio of angel investors to startup founders. We just got a high concentration of capital. Now, challenges being whether or not that capital is deployed inclusively, which is something that Venture Café has worked on with our Capital Days effort, and happy to join the folks at Culture Shifting Weekend to do that in 2021. But also, you think about it, we have on the funding side, our startups are actually raising significant money. Last year, South Florida companies raised about $2.37 billion. And so we're typically in that top 20 to 30 ecosystems for venture funding. We have some unique assets, thinking about EdTech. So we're getting to be a little bit of a hub for education technology. One, because we have the fourth largest public school district in the United States, and I think the 5th largest public school district in Broward in the United States. So you have this ample testing ground for a lot of these EdTech solutions, particularly thinking about the fact that our demographic is over 50% foreign born. I wasn't born here. I'm sure other folks on the call were also not born in the United States. And so there's a lot of opportunities for being that testing ground for what it looks like to deploy a technology solution globally without actually having to go globally. And I think that's a unique positioning of our market. The last factor to keep in mind is that we're also seeing quite a bit of activity around life sciences. So we're not as strong in R&D funding per se, or is not as much dollars put into that tech transfer pipeline coming out of institutions. But we do see a lot of innovation. A lot of patents are happening, a lot of cutting edge technology. The folks at Space Florida are doing a really good job of extracting life science technology that has application in space, for example. So there's a lot of great things happening. I think the biggest challenges are the same as in those larger markets: equity, racial equity particularly, equal distribution and access to resources, as well as, that clear roadmap to growth. Hopefully that answers your question.
Well, it sure did. And Pamela, do you want to add to that, or what you're saying?
Well, no, I think that was beautifully said. But if I may add, I think that if we look at Florida, we look at California, and we look at Massachusetts, what makes our state, if you will, different from the other two states is that we have collectively, there's an economic development blueprint, if you will, that we've all sort of adopted and found our way to be a part of and supportive of that. And for Miami-Dade County, the technology sector is certainly one of those that has grown exponentially over the past, I would say, 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, I remember some of the conversations 5 years ago, and it was very, very new. And I think, in fact, Leanne, I think where your offices are is where some of those conversations actually started. And so I think that it's one of those things that I think we're beginning to see more and more. I also think that, I think that there's a greater opportunity in a market that is as new and fresh as Miami for greater access and participation. And that's certainly something that I think is very unique to our community. And I think that's certainly one of the opportunities that yes, we have our ways, like every community does. And yes, we have a lot of work to do, especially on the equity, access part, and certainly racial equity part, absolutely. But I do think that there is a very good background, or platform, I should say, from which companies that want to come here and initiatives that want to build here can do that, because we're a very receptive, open community, and I think that collaboration is something that we welcome very much. Having said that, I also think we talked about, Leanne, you brought up life sciences, and I think that's sort of, if you put together the technology sector and the life sciences sector, it's almost on a similar timeline with a lot of different points of intersection, which there are some similarities. In the very beginning, and I say, beginning as in 5, maybe even 12 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, when we started to look at some of this sort of like big picture wise, like what are the industries that are going to be the most impactful in Miami, that have the most opportunities to impact. You know, in the very beginning, what we used to say is that a lot of this growth was being driven by universities and academic institutions, like the University of Miami that started investing with the life sciences sector, and, you know, certainly Miami-Dade College investing with the Magic Center, with the Miami Animation Gaming, and the Fashion Institute, and now the Cybersecurity Center of the Americas. And so I think it's just very unique. I think there's a lot going on, and that's what makes our community so interesting. We can talk about the aviation sector as well. That's one that is key to our community, and that from which there are a number of small businesses. Many a times folks think that it's about the Miami International Airport, which in and of itself is a tremendous hub and huge engine. But, you know, there's the aviation sector and all of the smaller businesses that provide the maintenance and repair and facilities and services. And then, of course, you have the financial services sector, which is an industry that our community has been sort of identifiable with or synonymous with. But then you have the creative sector, which, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, given my previous roles, where we're really, you know, and I think talk about looking at the future. It's one of those conversations that's happening right now in our community. How does the creative sector respond to the changes today? Whether it's the galleries, whether it's the architects, whether it's the interior designers, the film producers. That's a growing sector here and a very important one. And so I think that a lot of very interesting conversations are being had, and a lot of momentum and industry building is happening in our community. And that's what makes us different from other states.
Well, we just had another question that came in, and I'll be throwing in the questions as they come, because I think it's interesting to keep the momentum going here. The question was, what kind of landing support is there for foreign startups wanting to establish a presence in Miami? And are there particular areas of technology that are a focus for Miami?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know, first off, the Miami-Dade County economic partnership with the Beacon Council does have a specific focus around supporting foreign companies that include startups to kind of get their bearings. But secondly, there's specific programs that have different layers. So I think one place to always start is with the consulate or the embassy, if it has a specific embassy here, but normally it's a consulate, to meet with the trade commissioner, because they often have specific relationships. For example, Carolina, you're very well connected. I think last week or the week before, I'm Canadian, so I spoke on a panel for the Canadian Consul General. And then, so always starting obviously with the government partners. Most people don't realize how much their jobs are actually geared towards helping the startups that are looking to land where they have strategic geopolitical relationships. And then thirdly, there's different groups. So for example, Cambridge Innovation Center, which has a strategic partnership with Venture Café, does have a LATAM desk that has a LATAM soft landing program, where they are able to work with different startups around space needs and general connections in the community. In the past, Venture Café has had our Global Innovation Exchange, which is often two-way, but where we partner with a particular country or startup region within a country to help startups get connected. For example, last year we partnered with ProChile and hosted 25 startups from Chile, where they were resident at CIC, and then Venture Café created a specific engagement, soft landing connections, and business kind of readiness type program and mentorship support for those startups. And many have been able to get contracts and to expand their operations officially since then. So I think the first bet is always to check with the trade commissioner, and then groups like Cambridge Innovation Center, if you're looking for LATAM, or Venture Café in the past has had our Global Innovation Exchange for specific regions. And I always say Miami is a city where people are really open, to your point, Pamela, of grabbing coffee or grabbing a virtual coffee by Zoom now. And so if you reach out just, cold, and I know that seems very strange, but if you reach out cold, more likely than not, folks are going to say, yeah, I have time. I can't tell you how many cold emails I get. I'm not great on LinkedIn just because there's too many messages. But if you email me or you send me a DM on Instagram, for example, I will likely jump on a call and just connect you with people. So Miami's a very open market like that.
Pam, do you want to add to that?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think that was beautifully said. I would add to consider going to the binational chambers of commerce. A lot of them work very closely with the foreign consulates and with the foreign trade offices. And a lot of them are in the thick of some of the initiatives that are being launched. I know that, for example, this week, the French-American Chamber will be having a program at which they're dedicating half a day or so to the French tech, which is an opportunity to talk about inviting French technology companies to do business in the U.S. and Miami. So I think that's very helpful. And I think that actually the previous question was from your ambassador. Is that right, Carolina?
Right.
All right. Well, this program with French Tech will have the French ambassador giving opening remarks, and so there are a lot of different ways to collaborate on that. Then I also think that there are a number of organizations in the community that are dedicated to helping with that. Leanne brought up some of them, but there are a couple others that would be worth looking into. And at times it may be, an organization that's supporting a different industry sector than the one you're looking at, but there are different points of connection and intersection. So it's worth taking a look at that as well.
I'm going to interject here because you guys know that I have always been pushing the consulate corps, even before I was part of the consulate corps, because they are an untapped resource in any market, and nobody really goes to them. But, having, worked overseas as well, it is that exchange that you find between the embassies abroad and the local, the embassies here, or the local consulate offices. Their mission is to promote business on a two-way street. And what better way than us, reaching out locally to them. One of the other questions I have that came in is, I love that this panel on tech is all women. Are you seeing a higher number of women in the tech ecosystem in Miami? And if so, what do you attribute that to? So it's all women because there actually was supposed to be another woman on board, but she just had an emergency. And yesterday, Brian Bracken of Lightship Capital, who I was hoping he and his wife would have been on this call with us, also had a conflict with business, so they couldn't be on. But anybody want to take this one away? I kind of know the answer, but coming out of you two will come with two different perspectives, which is great. Pamela?
Pam, did you want to?
Okay, no, I think for us, it's sort of a given. I don't know that we even really think about it. I recently had a panel with, 4 women, and the moderator was a woman, and it wasn't by design. It just sort of happened that way. I know that I think we're conscious about it, but I also know that in Miami and South Florida, we have a number of really great, women professionals in leadership. And so I think that for that reason, that's what may happen. I don't know what I think our secret sauce is, just that we know that we have women in powerful in leadership positions. And I think that's why this happens. I don't know that I have very much more to add to that other than I just think it is in some way conscious, but I also think it's a consequence of our community. I think we've embraced it, and I think we're moving forward on it. Leanne?
Yeah, I would say to supplement that, it's really in the cultural context of Miami. So for those that don't know, Miami is, I think, the only major American city to be founded by a woman. So Julia Tuttle founded Miami in, back in 1890s and stuff like that. And so it's the culture. And interestingly enough, when we hosted the Rise of the Rest tour, the organizing committee, we sat around and the local host committee, and one day it was just all of us women. And it's funny when we were talking to Steve Case's team, we realized like Miami Tech is run by women. It's really unique. I think it's really special. I think we know the value of women in leadership positions quite well, particularly in 2020, more than ever. But what makes it great is that you have this really openness to collaboration. That is, I don't want to generalize between kind of gender, but in general, women tend to be very collaborative. They're really open to working in coalitions. They're very often able to see opportunities for kind of the rising tide lifts all boats approach. And so I think we see a lot more acceleration of initiatives when they started ideas, then, you know, in a snap, they are down to implementation. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that Miami Tech is really women driven. And not to say that men aren't involved, they're definitely involved. But when you think of a lot of the major organizations, so we have the second women's only accelerator, BAPS and WinLab out of Boston. So we have WinLab, Miami Angels, which is our local angel investment group, run by Rebecca Donta. We have Refresh Miami, run by Maria Derci, Cambridge Innovation Center, led by Maria. We have Mana Tech, led by Michelle Abbs, Venture Café, led by me, Endeavor, led by women. Again, the list goes on and on. WinCode co-founders, but Joe is definitely a powerhouse. So all of these Miami Tech, like, you know, stalwart institutions are women led. And I think that definitely is a testament to the culture.
Yeah, I think too, since Melissa's not here, all right, but I think we do need to give a lot of thanks to the Manny Medina with the Emerge Americas on really, and I was part of that for 2 years with them, on really launching and taking the bull by the horns, as we would say in Texas, right? And really bringing something so unique in 2014 to Miami that everybody said was going to fail. And from that has sprouted so much more. And I'd like for you two to kind of talk a little bit on both your ends, because Pamela, you've seen it in your previous job before coming to Miami-Dade College into the Goldman Sachs program. And Leanne, you've been right in the middle of it since you got here, which is awesome. So I'd like to see your take on this, and then we'll go on to more questions.
Sure. I mean, Emerge Americas is one of the Venture Cafe, and personally, Melissa and Felicia are dear friends and collaborators in pretty much everything that we're doing in ecosystem level. But I've had the privilege to host the main stage, and our team has always had presence on the Emerge floor for the last couple of years. And what I really love about Emerge is that it puts Miami on the map in a way that nothing else that's really happening in our ecosystem has the ability to do. Thinking about your role, Carolina, it's bringing, you know, leaders, thought leaders, startups from all over the Americas, mostly concentrated in Latin America and Europe, but really all over the world to converge on Miami. And what I love about the leadership that Melissa and Felice demonstrate is it could be an externally focused event, should they wish for it to be really a showcase on kind of the world, but they always are very intentional about plugging in the local assets and really making it an opportunity to showcase what is happening in the local ecosystem, from the pitch competition, where they really recruit very hard from the state of Florida, South Florida in particular, and they're very approachable about recommendations and really thoughtful about making sure it's inclusive, to some of the ancillary and main stage conversations where they make it a really good job. I know Mariana Lopez has been leading content there for quite some time, but they're really intentional about plugging in local leaders with national players, with the idea that those kind of in-moment interactions can spur to be opportunities for more collaborations and more partnerships between Miami and the world. And so I just think applaud to them for the great job that they've done. And really, we look forward to deepening the way that they engage in the ecosystem beyond the conference as they're doing more programming throughout the year.
Absolutely. I think what I would add to that is that I remember when eMERGE was first introduced in our community. And I think that what makes eMERGE so impactful is that not only did it really put Miami on the tech map, but what I always admire about this initiative is that it's community driven and community led. When you go to eMERGE, you get to experience Miami at its very best, South Florida at its very best. And I think that Melissa and Felice have done a wonderful job of being actively engaged in the community and being inclusive and helping, facilitate important conversations in our community that really lead to really embedding an industry and growing an industry and supporting an ecosystem as important as tech. And so I think that for that reason, their contributions are that much more impactful. I know I was fortunate to be in some of the initial presentations by Mr. Medina, by Manny Medina, when he first launched eMERGE. And at first folks were saying, what, are you sure? It just sounded like another conference, but it wasn't. And I think that, we're here now more than a couple of years later, we know that it's more than that. It's really one of those important initiatives in the community that have really helped sustain or market Miami as a tech hub.
Yeah, no, and I you both know, I was fully in there as their VP of operations for those 2 years on the international side. And it was engaging to bring in, that first, in 2015, we brought in 17 countries, all right? And those countries brought in their startups. And that's how, how you got the start of Chile and all the stuff we went down on the road trips to do. So this kind of leads me into a question, which I'm going to kind of semi-answer on my end and then let you guys answer too. But has there been any initiative or event specifically to connect the Miami tech scene with the tech scene in Portugal? Now, we have a great tech scene in Portugal, a phenomenal one. And I know that Leanne and I have been trying to get together and talk on this. And we actually had a meeting right before we all went into shutdown mode, scheduled, right? But that's point one. Point two is I have really been trying to work hard over the last 2 years with Web Summit in Portugal, which is also a massive conference that comes in and brings in people from all over the world, and with eMERGE. So Melissa and I have already been talking about that as well. And we were supposed to, this year, actually go together and do this, right? But then again, here we are, and we'll all be online with it. But and on my end, as your honorary consul here in Portugal in Miami, that is on my radar, because both of you know that my background is entrepreneurship. My background is startups. And this, to me, that connection is super important that it gets made. Startup Lisbon is amazing. We have Startup Porto. We have in Coimbra and the Algarve as well. All those organizations are with a really good, diverse group of startups that I think would and really enhance us here, and vice versa. Okay, and vice versa. So take it away, ladies. How can we connect Miami and Portugal on the startups?
I think my answer is there's no time like the present, right? If we've learned anything from 2020, it is that we should not wait, right? And so I think what that could mean is earlier this year, for Venture Cafe's 4-year celebration, we were celebrating 50,000 connections. We actually focused on global connections. So we did kind of this global innovation exchange, but a virtual edition, just because obviously we couldn't be going to all the countries. And, we leveraged our relationships from all the different places that I have been kind of doing the startup connection work. And just in that one event, I was talking to people from Indonesia, from Sydney, from Tokyo, and if you hear the rain, it's because it's an afternoon storm in Miami, from Nigeria, from Rwanda, from South Africa, from Madrid, from Mexico, all in a one-day event. And so why not? Like, why can we not just start with something virtual and look for 2021 for in-person? Mark my words, you have my pledge. I'm ready to do it.
Okay, got it.
Perfect. Well, I echo the sentiment. I think now is as good a time as ever. I think it's an opportunity to explore different opportunities, and whether it's in tech or whether it's in creative or whatever other industry. You know, Caroline, I remember when you introduced the opportunity to explore foreign direct investment opportunities with Portugal, right? When I was at Beacon Council, and because, you know, as Leanne rightly so said, Beacon Council embraces international partnerships. That's definitely something that I think should continue. We went, I think, for a couple of days, wasn't it? We had very good meetings with some of the trade associations, the port. And I also believe that we had a visit with one of the representatives of the Museum of Contemporary Art.
Exactly.
I think that all of those industries right there, along with technology, are industries that there are partners here in the community that will be more than happy to see how they can be leveraged and expanded. You know, just before we went virtual in that week, we had a delegation from Madrid, the Madrid Chamber of Commerce here in Miami. We actually had them here the day that we had to go virtual, so that was very interesting. You know, then we also had a delegation in from Italy, where we actually celebrated together the occasion of Small Business Week, and so that was very interesting as well. And so I think that there's no time better than the present to explore those opportunities, and I think it'll be absolutely fantastic.
Well, thank you. I got a question, which is, Miami is, people have total misconceptions of who we are, what we do, what we're capable of doing or not doing. I know that I get a lot of people that still want to see where Miami Vice was. I'm like, I don't even know where it was on TV. Okay, that's where it was. But I really, what are the misconceptions, for example, that you get in your groups? You know, for example, when you at CIC, Leanne, and then you, Pamela, the groups that come in that, you know, wow, I never thought Miami was like this. I'm totally shocked that this is Miami. You know, so what misconceptions are there, and how do we overcome them as a city? You know, to really get that voice out. Okay, Leanne?
Sure. So it's funny you asked that question, and I'm laughing because 2 years ago, a group of us went to South by Southwest because we had an opportunity to be in a particular house showcasing the Miami ecosystem. So Christine Johnson from Beacon Council was there. I was there. Some other folks were there. And on the Venture Cafe side, we're like, how do we showcase Miami in a fun way? So we made these postcards that had pictures that kind of were tongue-in-cheek about the misconceptions of Miami. So we had one that said we party all the time, and then you're like, no, actually, we've got X number, you know, of billions of dollars in capital or millions of dollars in capital deployed. The other one we said was beach, please. We're not always at the beach. We've got kind of the highest concentration of capital of co-working spaces per capita in the United States. The other misconception was that Miami's got no talent. And if you know Miami, you know we have the 4th largest public research institution in the United States. We are a college town, well over 250,000 college students across the major academic institutions in Miami. And so all of these misconceptions that we hang out at the beach, all we do is party, we don't have a talent landscape, or we're not a college town, I think help to give us an opportunity, I believe, to reshape the narrative of Miami. And it really is, I hate to say this, but it's all about how you market yourself. That's why Beacon Council is so intentional about, you know, the showcasing Miami. And so I think that the narrative that we have to sell and really be intentional about ensuring we all are saying the same talking points is Miami's got substance. If I had to come up with a tagline, it would be Miami's got substance, because we're often known as this superficial party beach town, where if you come here, you know that there are people doing really cool things. Ultimate Software just had an exit for, what was it? I think it was like $11 billion or something like that. And so we have companies that are scaling. We have really talented individuals creating ecosystem solutions that people from across the country are borrowing. We have unique outputs of national organizations like, 10,000 small businesses. And then we are uniquely positioned because we're closer to other countries than we are to the rest of the United States, which gives us a very unique perspective on how to go global first. And so I think, the fact that Miami has more substance is probably the narrative that we need to push.
Pamela?
I would agree wholeheartedly with that statement. I think that a lot of times folks don't really understand how much is in Miami or what is in Miami. I would say that definitely there's an opportunity to leverage the message about the academic institutions that are here in our community. So many times people would say, oh yes, but Miami's not home to a, Ivy League school of your choice, right? But we have fantastic academic institutions, research institutions. And so I think that that's certainly a message. And I think, yeah, the fun, sun message about Miami is something that's here to stay. I mean, we are very lucky to have a beautiful atmosphere and environment, but that doesn't mean that you can't have all of the other elements of a successful global city. But I do think that the narrative is changing. And I think that we've made some tremendous progress. And I think that the more we embrace partnerships and collaborations like the one we've been discussing today, the better it is. And really, I think as a community, being committed to raising the flag about Miami. So I think it's all going to come together very nicely.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer that this quarantine phase we've been in has really opened our eyes to a lot of the inequalities that exist, right? Not only here, but around the world. But if we want to play only in our arena, we were really wide open. Our eyes were wide open on a lot of issues. So being that said, now we have in Miami, sometimes I always, and Pamela will probably crack up laughing at this one, but I always say that everybody knows all the buzzwords, but they can't put it in a complete sentence that makes sense to all of us, right? So not using all the buzzwords, I just want, what is the diversity, the inclusion component? Is it in finance? Is it in opportunities that exist or don't exist? How can we start making a difference across borders, not just here, but starting here? How do we address that to our international crews that do come in? Because I know, Pamela, you deal with international. Leanne, I know you deal with a lot of the startups internationally. I mean, how can we change their perception of what they've seen here that is bad? And how are we improving it, or that has not ever been addressed? And how are we going to address it and get this better and on a better playing field? That's a loaded question, ladies, but I know you two can do this. Okay, I know you can.
So, well, Carolina, I spend a lot of time thinking about these questions.
I know you do.
Much time thinking about these questions. And so I think for me, it really starts with three main things. One, rethinking about who we center, right? Who are we centering in terms of how we showcase our city, showcase the opportunities, and dispel some of the misconceptions. And I think oftentimes when it comes to working with international partners, I also have a different perspective because I am not from here. I've been here a long time, but I'm from a completely different country with a completely different cultural context, right? And so as an immigrant, I think it's important to center the folks that are not the majority, and that's where you begin to see where opportunities exist. And so what I mean by that is just starting with experiences. The one thing I miss most about the Thursday gathering is, I'm kind of an introvert, so not the large crowds of people, but the idea that you can experience something, and that is what creates a emotional connection point to a place or a community or a particular organization. And so even if you have a preconceived notion of a place, once you experience it in its depth, you are likely to shift your perspective. Some people know that I lead an organization where I do leadership training by taking low to moderate income leaders, young youth leaders abroad. So this is the first year since 2014 that I will not be on the African continent or in Southeast Asia, for example. And what our kids say is before they go, they have a certain perspective and they're really open-minded. But once they go, they realize how similar we are, how much opportunities we have, how much relationships can be developed after an experience. So I do think experience-based immersion is an important piece to changing perspectives. And I think the other question that we need to think about is less around the what, but more around kind of like why people do what they do and why people have the experiences they have, and beginning to look closer at, just connecting with people on a personal level. I know that seems very, very basic, but you said no buzzwords, but like, do people feel seen, acknowledged, heard, or valued, irrespective of what their status is as a startup, where they come from, how they get connected in a community? Like, people's experiences and validation really matter. And I think that transcends kind of the business community to the cultural community, to the education sector, to the business sector, the government sector, right? And so really looking at how we can see people as people and not as numbers or not as particular groups, and begin to think about how you cater towards experiences.
I would agree. I would also say that I think that something that I think is very important is to be thoughtful about being active, reaching out actively. I think it's important to reach out to those that have maybe not been made aware of an opportunity or of a certain conversation in the community. That's where I really think that we as a community have done a good job in terms of helping facilitate certain conversations. Like, Leanne, this is what you do very much at some of the virtual or some of the community gatherings that you host. I think being thoughtful and intentional about saying, you know what, I'm going to reach out to this organization and invite them to join in on this conversation, or I'm going to invite these folks to listen to this presentation. For now, everything is virtual, but doing it in that way. Secondly, I think that from, how do we engage the international partners? It's something that I'm very that's important to me. And so I think that it's a question of knowing your community so that each of us as members of the greater business civic community of Miami and South Florida, when we have these opportunities, we can sort of help facilitate some of these ideas or some of these initiatives. I think that's very helpful. And then I think that something that I think will also be or is important for us is to always, take the time to understand, to embrace the diversity, to embrace the uniqueness of a certain group or a certain initiative. That's where I think the opportunity comes. And the good news is that as a community, I think, hardly ever, if never, I should say, have I known of an initiative that's been introduced, whether it's by one of the community organizations or one of the consulates or one of the chambers, been introduced and not been embraced. I think quite the contrary. I think we as a community thrive, knowing that there's an opportunity for collaboration with international partners.
Yeah, and I would go a little step further, where I think that as a mixed community that we are, so diverse, right? That we bring our strengths from our countries, from our upbringing here as well. And some of it blends in very well, but others, people learn from it. And we in turn learn best practices as well. And combining those two together, come up with a pretty unique solution to certain problems that are out there. For example, I like I said, lived and worked in Portugal, and now when I go back all the time, I also find the creativity that new generation in Portugal that's in startups and everything, their energy is beyond, okay? And I thought I was energetic, but their energy is beyond. And I love to sit with them and listen to their thought process, just like I did when I went to Israel a couple of times to DLD, right? And DLD has been very impactful here in Miami. And I mean, you know, what was it, Pamela, the state of Florida, they did that $1 million match with the aerospace, correct? Mm-hmm. During your time when you were at your previous job. So I think this kind of reach out between governments and between people, that relationship building, I think is super important for us to really continue to grow.
You know, Caroline, I know that we're almost at our time, but I wanted to say that I think going back now that I'm thinking this through a little bit more, is I think that what makes our community so unique is that we have a global mindset. And I think, you know, we don't even realize it because it's just who we are, right? But I mean, look at this panel. Leanne, you've talked about, you know, that you were born in another country, Carolina, obviously, as well, myself as well, Central American from Nicaragua, you know, and the opportunities are endless. And so I think that, you know, in Miami, we go from, I don't know, breakfast at a French bakery to lunch at a, you know, Cuban place and, you know, dinner at a Portuguese. Why not? We enjoy good food, but no, in all reality, we also just have this global mindset where you can, each community is unique and welcomes. And I think that having that sense of appreciation for that global mindset is what makes our community so unique as well. Knowing, of course, that there's more to do always and more to embrace and more to, it's all about being genuinely inclusive.
So Leanne, what question should I have asked and didn't ask?
I mean, you did really great.
I knew I had a challenge with you ladies. Okay, so I did my homework on this one. So.
I mean, for me, you know, the only thing, like as afterthoughts to Pam's point, the thing that's coming to my mind is, as a community, any community, thinking about the different startup communities, innovation communities in Portugal as well, you know, one of the questions that we often have to ask, which is kind of an existential question, is like, what is the role of innovation, right? Innovation can be very narrowly focused on tech transfer, technology, jobs, output, business models. I personally, and Pam, you've probably heard me say this, and Carolina as well, I think about innovation much more broadly. I think that innovation is that process that is designed to create solutions that improve the human condition, and therefore the opportunities to use an innovation mindset and an innovative approach are really endless. And so as an ecosystem builder, I like to say ecosystem enabler, because I'm not building anything, I'm just enabling other people to be great. But as an ecosystem enabler, I think a lot about what are the types of currency, like what are the multiple forms of currency that we need to identify, activate, and accelerate. And it's not just financial capital. I know I started by talking a lot about, you know, the VC dollars, the investment, but it's not just about financial capital. You know, for us and for me, I think there's 6 forms of capital that every ecosystem needs to be thinking very intentionally about. How do we identify, activate, and accelerate? Social capital. Super important. Miami is probably the most who you know city that I've ever been in. And I mean, that's the reality. Humans are hardwired to connect with like, and things that are like are things that you know, and things that you know are things that you have relationships with. Therefore, social capital is important. The other things that are really important as we think about racial equity, access, and inclusion is inspiration capital. Like this panel, we're women. That's not normal in the startup space. Are there people whose experiences resonate with yours that you can look up to? I want to get political, but the fact that there's a half Jamaican woman running, on the ticket for VP that I am personally a fan of is huge for me, because then, young girls that see their experience in that can look up to that particular inspiration capital. We also have to think about creative capital. Miami has severe disparities in terms of economic disparities and opportunity disparities. If you can't pay your bills, you can't innovate. You can't come up with solutions. And so looking at how we eliminate some of those external pressures to allow people to be entrepreneurs, to be innovative, and then capacity. How do we get people in those pipelines like Goldman Sachs that then leads to something like the passport program that Pam, I need to talk to you about, which is for later stage companies trying to scale up. And then finally, political capital. And this is really important, right? How do those institutional players that have traditional access to power, influence, and the ability to lever things for the benefit of whole groups or communities, how do we get more of that into the hands of those that are traditionally the have-nots? So for me, I just think, the only thing that it's not that you didn't ask it, but that like sums up a lot of my thoughts is often this innovation currency framework by looking at what are these 6 forms of capital and how do we intentionally design for their equal distribution.
Thank you. And Pamela, you want to add on to that or?
No, I think that was beautifully said. So I'm going to leave it at that. I think Leanne brought up some very, very good points and we've got some work to do. Absolutely. But I'm all about supporting the creative capital. I do think that that's a very, very important piece. And I know that our program, just in closing, our program is committed to helping connect the dots between all of those pockets of opportunity and facilitating access. Absolutely. As well as of course, MDC.
Okay, a takeaway from this, Leanne, Pamela, and then we'll close shop on it. But I don't have any more questions.
So I'm looking to my right. You can't see it, but I was a big model UNer in college, and we've hosted a lot with the kind of the UNA USA, and I think a lot about the SDGs. And so I think for me, the biggest takeaway is, think globally, act locally, right? We can, to your point, Pam, have that global mindset, and we do. And so not being afraid to share best practices and to develop communities of practice that are not just limited locally, but allow for us to learn from folks around the world and likewise share what we know from folks around the world so that we can locally be better. That's my biggest takeaway.
Okay, Pamela?
Absolutely. I think that would be mine as well. But I would also add, I think that we're going to be, the best practice case study for collaboration. And I think that Miami has been at the forefront at the forefront of a lot of these conversations. We're dealing with issues that other cities in the United States have yet to even discover will be issues, coming up. And some cities, I would say even some cities worldwide too. I mean, some of the countries that I know well in Europe and in Latin America, they don't know what they're seeing, but this is in fact what we're seeing. And I think that as a community, I'm very proud about where we are. And I'm proud about our commitment, I think, as a community of knowing that we have a lot more work to do and that we're going to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to thank both of you. And I also want to already put in the invite for 2022 when we come back to Miami at this beautiful Biltmore Hotel, that we will continue this discussion, but we'll have a lot more to add on it because between now and then, I have to sit down with the two of you and see how we are going to get all this going, and Melissa as well as Brian and Candace. So I can't thank you enough on behalf of PALCUS for being part of this with us today and showcasing Miami for us. And definitely as the Honorary Consul of Portugal, which I'm privileged to be here in Miami, I also thank you on their behalf. So thank you and have a great rest of the day. All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you
so much. Thank you, Carolina. Thank you, Leanne. Take good care.
Thanks, guys.